Well, hello, my name is GenXer. I'm the director of Crosslands, and I'm here this afternoon with Terry English. Terry is the director of learning and development for Josiah Venture, and we're going to be having a conversation about differences between generations and, most importantly, the implications for leadership and how we lead when there are quite significant differences happening between generations. And Terry's really well qualified to talk about this. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you come to be speaking on this subject.
For many, many years, I've been a youth worker. And 25 years ago, I moved to the Czech Republic and grew various youth ministry programs. And as they grew, so did my own leadership skills have to develop. So over the years, I've got 25 years of youth ministry experience, but now also 25 years of project management and leadership experience as well. And over the years, I've worked hard at developing leadership development programs for young people. So I've seen how young people have changed and developed, and how we've had to change and develop our approach of equipping young people and leading young people as that's been happening.
Thank you, and we're looking forward to tapping into some of that knowledge in a moment. But just to refer back to an earlier conversation you and I had, we were talking about leaders being first and foremost learners. Just tell us about one or two things that you've really learnt in the last few years that have shaped you as you've continued to be a learner.
My biggest, most recent lesson is it's really important to keep asking for feedback and receiving feedback. I love reading, I love learning, but one thing I realized a couple of years ago, I had a 360-degree feedback from various generations within my organization, and the feedback was in many ways positive. I've done quite a few things and launched quite a few things, but what several people said is that my leadership style was too directive. And that was a surprise to me. I know that I've had a more directive leadership style in the past. I went to military school. That's where I learned what leadership is initially. But over the years, I thought I had become a much more supportive leader. Yeah. But the feedback that I received from people was, no, actually, you're still pretty directive. And that surprised me. But I really needed to give the people the space to give the feedback. My response to that was to actually enroll in a 4-month course in coaching. Just a normal ICF coaching course, because my directive muscles are very strong. And I needed to actually practice having those coaching, supporting conversations.
Yeah, and develop a different muscle memory for it.
A completely different muscle memory.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, one of the things feedback tells us is something about ourselves, but it also reveals something about the person giving the feedback. Yes. And one of the that's valuable for telling us something about the people that we're leading. Why is it important to understand and know about those that we are leading?
Mm-hmm. Well, in any series of communications, it's really important to know your audience, understand your audience. I think sometimes when we're talking about leadership, it's easy for the leader to make the assumption, well, I'm the leader, so I'm the audience that people need to know. Do what I ask you to do or anticipate my needs and do it. But culture is changing, and especially with as younger people come into the workforce. In 2 years' time, 70% of the workforce are going to be millennials and iGeneration. They come into the workforce with a different set of expectations from their leaders. And if you don't know what those expectations are, we can make some easy leadership mistakes that we don't need to make. One of the things that I've learned recently is just how important relationship is, even in the workplace. So one of the pieces of feedback I received from one person is, you've never invited me to lunch. And my response was, well, we have a very friendly, open working relationship. You know, we drink coffee together. But the response was, yeah, but I've seen you invite other people to lunch. Why haven't you invited me to lunch? Is there a relational barrier there? And there was no relational barrier, but because I wasn't behaving in a way that for her was important, a barrier had been created, and it was a needless barrier.
Yeah, brilliant. And you're referring there to differences, different generations. Mm-hmm. There. Take us through just some of those generational differences that you've seen. Spell them out for us in a little bit more detail, and how you see those play out in the workforce and the workplace.
So in the workplace now, there would be 4 major generations. You've got the baby boomers. So those are the people that are running the show in a lot of the companies right now, the founders of companies and organizations, still the directors. and hardworking, a view of leadership which is very much positional, or I'm the boss. Please respect me. I'm making a decision. Please respect that. I don't need to necessarily explain the why. But also really caring for their organization, a strong loyalty for the organization and the people. Then you have Generation X, that's my generation. We're called the squeezed generation. The baby boomer generation was large. The millennials is a very large generation. We come in the middle. We experienced in our childhood sometimes a less positive environment. There were some recessions as we were growing up. There were some wars. And so a little bit of fragility there, a little bit of wanting to prove ourselves. But also, our view of authority would say is positional. We were taught a policeman, you respect them because of the uniform of a policeman. You respect a teacher because they are the teacher. Then you have the millennials coming in. It's a much larger generation. They were told to expect the world. The world is your oyster. And the parents wanted to give maybe what they didn't receive themselves. And so it was a generation that started off with a lot of hope, a lot of anticipation, and a lot of that hope and anticipation hasn't happened. They've also lived through several recessions.
What sort of age are millennials now?
So millennials now would be from the age of 28 to around 40. So that's the age group that they are now. I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that millennials are now so old. People still think of millennials as like older teenagers, but no, 28 to 40 is the age that they are now. So there's kind of two parts of the millennial generation. The first part were a lot more hopeful, ambitious, wanting to make things work their own way. The second part saw, this isn't working out. I'm not going to be able to afford a home. I'm not going to get the promotion I want. So a little bit more jaded. And this is the generation that people began to say is more fragile. Maybe more in touch with their emotions might be a better way of saying it. But still very hard workers, but hardworking in a different way from the other generations. And then we have the iGeneration. They are different from millennials, and it's really important to understand that. The iGeneration have seen what happened with the millennials, and they've said, well, I understand that I really have to work hard for what I want. But I'm going to make it work. I'm going to make it work on my terms. So they are really good at adapting. With younger people, tell them the why behind the what and let them figure it out themselves. They're very good at that. And of course, iGeneration, they grew up with phones in their hands. We had to learn how to use those things as we got older. And so a digital reality, everything is done through a phone for young people today. But that's also done some interesting things with the mind. I don't think the human brain is equipped to deal with so much information, so many messages. And so there is a real fragility there. And all studies right now are showing that anxiety and depression, not only amongst millennials, but also amongst iGeneration, are something we really have to take into consideration. So especially as we're leading some of these generations, we have to consider their feelings and emotions. We can't just say, get the job done. You're at work now. I'm paying you to be productive. We have to take into consideration who are they as a whole person.
And all of those differences can really impact on what it takes to be effective as a leader. Yes. Tell us a little bit more about how those differences impact on effective leadership, prevent or enable effective leadership.
Well, I think one thing that's very interesting is if we look to Jesus, how he led, he actually has a model for us that was impactful 2,000 years ago, and it is very impactful today because he saw the person. He spoke to Peter and he said, Peter, I see who you are. When Peter messed up, he said, it's okay that you messed up. You will build my church. And so Jesus really, he saw the person and he gave them direction. And I think for all generations we need this, but I do think that some of the older generations, it feels like if you are more attached to the project, shall we say, and the younger people are more attached to the people involved around the project. For older people, a job well done is a job well done. For younger people, it's who you did the job with that makes it a job well done. The experience of completing the task is really important.
I'm recognizing conversations that have happened at home from all that you're saying here. You spoke earlier on about being a GenXer. We share that in common. Because what you've been talking about here is our need to adapt to those that we lead. But what are one or two things that you wish the younger generation understood about leaders of our sort of generation?
I think there's two things that would be important for them to understand. One is, for Generation X, for example, we are the squeezed generation. So maybe the leadership or the management level above us is still holding on, and then you've got these millennials coming up wanting our jobs. And so there's a feeling of, but wait, I was waiting, and now what's going to happen now? Because the reality is, for some of these positions, it will be the younger people that in today's society will be more adept at fulfilling those roles. So there is, in some ways, a guardedness possibly. We might look at some of the younger generations with a little bit of, I'm going to say fear, although we wouldn't like to call it fear. On the other hand, I think it's really important for younger generations to understand responsibility or position, all these things, they do need to be earned. Don't take it for granted that just because you've been given the role, the world, you'll be given everything that you want. And what we've been seeing in the workforce is younger people are demanding much higher starting salaries. They're expecting much more open working conditions, working from home whenever they want to and things like that. And these are things that companies are saying, well, we're not against giving you these things, but we'd like you to earn them first. We want to see some impact before we give you the things that we do want to give you, but please earn it first. And I think that's something that's important for younger generations to understand is what they are wanting is on offer, but it does need to be earned. They need to show what they're bringing to the table.
That's so helpful. Let's turn that conversation around now, sort of represent the voice of the younger generation. To those of us who are a little bit older, I so enjoy working. I get to work with many, many young leaders and learn a great deal from them. Summarize for us some of the key things that we need to be learning from younger leaders.
Again, the key thing is they are not afraid to work hard if they understand the why and are given the space to do that. So I would say when you're working alongside a young leader for the first time, give clear direction because you want them to be successful. I think today, especially with the anxiety levels and things like that, people are more afraid to fail than they were when I was younger, especially in some parts of Central and Eastern Europe where you have maybe a shame-based schooling culture. Failure is not seen as a good thing, whereas I would say making mistakes is a part of the learning process. So I think young people, they need a lot of help understanding this is the culture and the expectations. And this is the learning framework, but it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to make mistakes. And I think it'd be very wise for them to understand how much they can bring to the table. Younger people today, they see what's happening in culture maybe before some of the older people in the workforce. A lot of companies are trying to reach their age group. They know what will work when it comes to marketing, technology, and things like this. So they are vital to the workforce. So they have what we might say is like the timely knowledge, the timely truth, but they should also understand that maybe the older generations, they have timeless truths. They've made a few mistakes as they've been going through, and there are certain principles that they know to be true, and they would be very wise of older generations to say, let me coach you through this. And for younger generations to say, I do want to learn, and they do want to learn. That's something that's really important. But please give me the space to show what I can bring to this company.
That's a terrific kind of juxtaposition, the timely truth and the timeless truth, and our ability to bring that together. Yeah. And I mean, that's an example of how the learning between generations can make us more impactful as leaders of any generation. Yes. Give us some more examples of that. What are some of the other ways in which this kind of intergenerational learning and appreciation can make us more impactful leaders?
I think it'd be very wise for all generations to ask each other, well, even the simple question in leadership, what is authority to you? How do I gain your trust? Because we do have a different view of trust and authority, and especially, I'm going to say with the breakdown of public trust in our institutions, in politics, even in the church, sometimes we can take for granted that there is a level of trust that in the leadership that might not necessarily be there. So I think on all sides, it's important just to keep asking things like, how do my actions impact your work? It's a simple question. If a younger person was to ask that of an older person, they would maybe be pleasantly surprised to learn, actually, I'm opening doors that I didn't realize I was opening up. I have knowledge sets that are unique to me that I didn't realize that some of the older generations are able to use. But they might also learn, I'm coming across as a little bit impulsive or I'm not phrasing my questions in possibly the right way. Maybe I'm being a little bit too direct. On the flip side of that, an older generation, if they were willing to ask that question, how do my actions impact your work? They might realize that they're actually holding someone back, that a person from a different generation, or even their own generation, has more under the hood that they want to give, but they've not been given that opportunity. So each generation, they have a very specific set of eyes that can help each other learn how to better lead.
Can we come back to the question of authority?
Mm-hmm.
Just say a little bit more about some of the different postures towards authority, or what people's relationship is with the whole idea of authority at those different generations.
So as I mentioned earlier, I think for the older generations, authority is more positional. It's the function, it's the person, it's the experience. In a setting like the forum, it's the person that's written a book. So it is much more positional. This is what I've done. For younger people, authority is, this is what you can do for me. It's relational. So even in school, you respected the teacher because they were the teacher, but the teacher that you liked was the teacher that you felt liked you. And for young people, being liked and authority, they're much more similar. They actually, as I said, they want a relationship with their leaders. And so a teacher that reaches out to younger people will be seen as an authority that is an authority, rather than, you're just a teacher.
A position.
It's a position. So it really is the relationship. If you see me, I will actually be happily led by you.
That's a very powerful idea, isn't it? Yeah. Let's come back to the iGeneration most specifically. You've touched on it. That was really, really helpful. What are some of the key lessons for those of us who find ourselves leading people who represent that iGeneration?
I am actually so excited that there's a lot of iGeneration people coming into the workforce. I work with a lot of young people, and their ability to serve, to take on responsibility, it's unbounded. Yes, there are issues with anxiety. There are issues with mental health, and rightly so in many ways. As I said already, because they grew up with a phone in their hands, their brain has developed in a way that ours didn't, and it has had a very real chemical, biological impact. So we do need to be aware that I'm not going to say there's limitations at all, but in order to be all that they can be, there does need to be a much more coaching mindset when working with young people. But if they understand the why and give them a few clear directions as to the what, so that they can get started well, goodness me, the ability to hack a solution, the ability to just get on with it and to bring in other people into that conversation. With young people today, they're way more connected than we ever were. They have resources at their fingertips that we don't have. And so you can ask somebody a question. They might not know the answer, but they for sure will know where to get the answer. We just need to give them permission to do that. So I'm really excited by what the younger generations bring. And I really think the best way to walk alongside young people is to have a more coaching mindset. And actually, there's been a lot of studies recently that have shown that. Google, when they were looking at, they actually thought about scrapping their whole management role. They realized that wasn't a good idea, but then they asked their workforce, what is the one thing you're looking for in a manager? The number one answer was, we want a coach. Deloitte & Touche and PricewaterhouseCoopers in the last couple of years have both released research about the iGeneration and millennials in the workforce, and their conclusion was, in order to get the most out of this workforce, you need to re-equip your managers to become coaches. And that's not coaches in the pure sense. Purely coaching conversation, you allow the person to make up their own mind. Young people still need leading. Leaders should still lead, but it's how we're leading. Let us walk alongside these young people, show that we believe in them, show them that we're there for them and that their success is actually what's important to us, and let them transform our organizations, because they will.
They will, and they're creatures made in God's image, who
Yes.
He's given us to walk with, and we should be thankful and joyful.
Absolutely.
To be leading them. Terry, this is absolutely terrifically interesting conversation. Thank you very, very much, and all God's blessings on you as you continue to train and develop people in this ministry.
Thank you. I'm going to end just by summarizing one final thing. If there are a lot of resources out there. One book that I found very helpful recently is by Dr. Tim Elmore. He's just released a book called A New Kind of Diversity, and it's about how to help different generations make the most out of each other in an organization, learn from each other, work together. But I would also say, and I've referred to this already, Jesus. Many of his disciples were young people. If you look at how he walked alongside his disciples, how he developed them, how he led them, he saw them as people. He spent 3 years with them and then left them to grow his church. If there's any other book I would recommend, it's the New Testament. Look at what Jesus did and ask yourselves, what can I learn from how he led these people?
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much for this time and this conversation.
Thank you.
God bless.